My name is Matt Galloway, and I'm here to talk about what I call the art of inclusion. I wanted to show you two photos. They're both of Toronto. Have a look if you would. The first photo. This was taken on the last day of the 2010 World Cup. It's taken right outside my office on Wellington Street, just outside the CBC. The second photo. This is Toronto City Council. Do you see the city that you live in, the city that was in that first shot, in this second shot? I'm not talking about politics. I'm talking about the city that you live, that you breathe, that you soak in when you ride the subway and walk the streets of Toronto. Do you see it in this photo? Well, no, you don't, of course. We talk a lot in this city with obvious pride about multiculturalism. We say we are the most multicultural city on the planet. The entire world is here in Toronto. And in many senses, that's true. If you take the 54 East bus, which runs along Shepherd Avenue, an amazing trip. You see from strip mall to strip mall, communities kind of rolling into each other. That's an incredible snapshot of the world in one street. If you stay in town on a long weekend, instead of going to a cottage or something like that, and go down to the waterfront, something that I love to do, and hang out by Harborfront, waiting for the ferry, you will see the entire city. Generations of families with suitcases full of food heading to the island. That is obviously the world in one city. We welcome difference. We understand in the city that the idea of tolerance, which is a really problematic word to me, is not enough, that we are better than tolerance in the city. I would argue, though, that we're also better than diversity. Now, you can fight amongst yourselves about how sophisticated we are as a city when it comes to being mature, and how mature we are when it comes to shaping the city that we want. Discussions over the last couple of days would suggest that perhaps we're not that mature when it comes to the idea, perhaps, of transit and paying for transit in the city. We are mature enough, I think, though, to move beyond this idea of diversity and move to an idea of inclusion. There's a friend of mine who has a great line. She says that diversity is the mix and inclusion is what you do with that mix. And so the art of inclusion, if you take that on, the art of inclusion is actually bringing that mix to life and making sure that the people who are here, the people who represent that diversity that you champion when you travel around the world and say, I love Toronto because it's the most diverse city on the planet, that those people actually have a real shot at being involved in shaping the city that you want to live in. Take a look at some of the institutions that make up Toronto. Take a look at business, a look at politics, a look at the media, civil society, and ask whether those institutions actually look like the city that you're in now. Not the city that was in past, not the city of 5 years ago, but the Toronto of 2012. I think most don't, as we've seen in that photo, and that's a real problem, because the art of diversity is a bit like diversity 2.0. The art of inclusion is diversity 2.5 or 3.0, this idea of taking it and moving it to a new level. It's about changing the complexion of leadership in this city where, according to our good friends at the Maitrey Foundation, something like 14% of the leaders in this city and in the entire region are actually visible minority. But if you look at the entire city and the entire region, that's over 50%. That doesn't square at all. And to a lot of people, that's a real problem. The art of inclusion is like taking a look at that appointments page in the Globe and Mail. Do you ever look at that, in the appointments page, and it says this person was appointed to this board in this corner fancy office? And you look at it and you think, who are these people, and how does that actually look like the entire city of ours? It doesn't take away from those people, but you would want to see, with the art of inclusion at its full flight, the breadth of the city on that page. It's about ensuring that the conversations that we have on a daily basis about the city and about the future of the city actually include the entire city and not just little slivers of it. Now, in a way, this is a science. Numbers do matter, and you can use metrics to measure, to see whether you're actually making a difference. And that's really important because you have to be able to measure that you're making change. But I like to think of inclusion more as an art. It is a way to use choices deliberately to build and create the kind of place that you want to be in. And like the best kinds of art, it can be deliberate, and it can be pointed. It can be a mirror that reflects who you are, but it can be that hammer that helps shape who you want to be. I work in public broadcasting, and we're paid by the public, so we take this pretty seriously, in part because we want to remain employed, and I still want to have a job at the end of the day. And I take this seriously in part because we see the results. The show that I happen to host is very successful. Not because we're giving away $10,000 at 10 after 8 in the morning, not because we're sending you to Cancun and a beach, but because we actually, and this sounds obvious, but it's true, we actually sound like the city that we're in. And if you don't turn on the radio in the morning and think this is the only place that I could hear this conversation, then we might as well turn the lights out when we leave the studio at the end of the morning, because we're not actually doing our job. You're either, and I honestly believe this, you're either reflective of the place that you're in at that time, or you're almost irrelevant. And that goes for a public broadcaster, but it goes for a magazine, it goes for an art gallery, it goes for a bank, and it certainly goes for a city council. The danger, if you don't get this right, is twofold. I think you can be irrelevant, and that's important, but you can also start to lose a sense of cohesion, and you don't achieve the potential that you actually have in the city. We pride ourselves, as I was saying earlier, on being more than tolerant. But if you scratch just a little bit beneath the surface, intolerance is right there. It's just beneath the surface. And you don't have to work very hard to try and get to that intolerance. So that, to me, the art of inclusion is really at the heart of the art of the city. It's about building the kind of Toronto that you want to live in, but making sure that at that big table where you're having the conversation, the table is long enough that everybody can be there, and the invitations are out so that everybody can participate. And if you do it right, it's a huge ask, but if you do it right, you can change this to this. Cross your fingers. Thank you very much.